Oh, again, good evening. Thank you for your patience. It was taking me a few minutes to get things sorted out as the multi-stream was not working to push the stream to YouTube, I mean to Facebook. So I was trying to figure that out, of course. And I didn't want to rush myself too much tonight. We're going to take our time and go through a few things. Obviously, there's been so many things going on. There's been a lot going on in the past month, and I know that I've not been committed to the streams as I should be. So I apologize for that and I ask for your forgiveness, but I'm back. I've got my microphone, I've got my blazer jacket on because we mean business tonight. We're talking about something very important, talking about the future of the country, we're talking about lives being lost, we're talking about the possibility of future violence in the country. These are all things that are serious and require, at the very least, our serious attention. And so, thank you for being here. Thank you for sticking it out with me. I hope that you're doing well. I hope everybody that you love is doing well. I know that if you spend a lot of time online, you're probably feeling the immense amount of stress and confusion that seems to be spreading its way through the left and the right of the political spectrum. Everybody is reeling, of course, from the assassination of Charlie Kirk. We're going to be talking about that tonight. What does it mean for the country? Who done it? Of course, the raging debate on Twitter right now is the whole world of investigative journalists and independent researchers have been unleashed on the internet to try and discover who it was that was responsible for the assassination. Of course, a lot of theories are bouncing around, a lot of crazy ones, a lot of interesting ones. So we're gonna take a look at all that stuff. But before we get into the meat of the issue. I don't want to get too bogged down in the details of the assassination. There's a lot of other people that are talking about those things. I wanted to kind of zoom out and talk about the bigger picture for a moment and maybe just reflect a little bit on what exactly it means for everybody else and, what it means for the future of the country. But by way of introduction, I wanted to do like a little disclaimer. And I've been running into this in my conversations with people on social media about politics in general, specifically about this situation because of the very degenerate, disgusting, and reprehensible response to the death of Charlie Kirk on behalf of what appeared to me to be pretty average, well to do, liberal, leftist participants. And so this kind of energy being unleashed in the discourse, it definitely marks a significant change in the vibes on each side of the political spectrum. I think it's definitely going to have some pretty serious repercussions. But one thing that we have to keep in mind, and this is by way of disclaimer, is what I wanted to say. The thing that we need to keep in mind is that when we're speaking of the left, and I put that in scare quotes when I say the left, or when I say leftists, or when I say liberalism or liberals in general. Now there's an IQ bell curve when it comes to speaking in generalities. The lowest point at the beginning of the bell curve is just outright dismissing generalities. You know what I mean? And or actually, I would say let's do it in the opposite. The beginning of the bell curve is an ignorant acceptance of generalities. In other words, it means you believe that generalities are universally true. The midwit, top of the bell curve, the person who thinks they're intelligent when approaching generalities, but clearly hasn't understood them very well, is the person who is addicted to always telling you the exception that proves the rule. So you could say something like, the response to Charlie Kirk's assassination on behalf of the American left was reprehensible. And then there will be a whole army and line of people waiting to tell you about the people that they know that were Democrats or liberals that actually didn't respond that way, as though we don't know that those people exist. On the other end of the bell curve, the high IQ end, is the recognition that generalities and exceptions can both be true. Now, of course, if you have too many exceptions, you can start to question the generality. But this is a disclaimer in the way of being charitable. I want people to recognize at the outset, I know that not every left wing political thinker is like this. I recognize that there are good Democrats, there are good left-wing politicians. They're good people that are activists, that are doing political organizing in the Democratic Party, people that mean well, people that genuinely do well. And I know that. I'm aware. The point in my critique of this response is that it's not only coming from what you would imagine to be the more extremist elements of the left wing. It's actually coming from regular people. And it's not just coming from regular people, it's coming with a casual vibe that, in my opinion, is very disconcerting. And it should give anybody pause. Anybody who's observing what's happening in the political arena should be concerned that this type of rhetoric is being not only displayed, but displayed with audacity and displayed almost with the expectation that repercussions are not imaginable. And that to me is it's a scary step in American politics, and the discourse seems to be going in a very hairy direction. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that. So I wanted to open up by saying, I know. I know not all Democrats are like this. I know not all liberals are like this. I know not all left-wing activists and political organizers are like this. But it is a disturbing amount. And what do I mean by like this? Well, I'm going to share with you some of the clips. One other second part of the disclaimer. I am required by my theological and philosophical beliefs to meet the world from a foundation of forgiveness. I do not encourage people being violent towards other people. I don't encourage outright hostility, even in a verbal sense. I think that, I mean, all of us can be guilty of this. We've probably all contributed to the spiral of poor communication that seems to be occurring in between the left and the right of the political spectrum. But I wanted to be clear up front that I do believe in Christian forgiveness. I do believe in being charitable. And my intention in putting these clips together and sharing them with you is not to cause people who are angered by this, it's not to cause them to be angry, and it's not to give them justification to do anything evil or in any ill will towards people around them that are Democrats or liberals. This is merely a call to repentance. If you are a liberal, if you are a Democrat and you know me, I'm urging you to become aware of the fact that this type of rhetoric and this type of extremism is a lot more prevalent amongst your compatriots than you might be aware of. Or it's possible that you know and you just don't care. And that's also a problem. And so that's why we're talking about it. So I'm encouraging people who listen to this, and I'm encouraging myself all the time and trying to practice an element of Christian forgiveness. And what that means is that we have to accept people's genuine repentance. And I think that should be always the place that we operate from. And so let's begin by, well, actually, let me say this. The third aspect of the disclaimer is that when evil, ugly, degenerate people do evil, ugly, degenerate things, they might not know it, but I think spiritually speaking and psychologically speaking, there's an aspect in that behavior, the desire that arises in them to bring people down to their level. There's something about, if you're an evil and you're a disfigured person in your heart and in your spirit, there's some type of adrenaline rush and thrill that you get from taking beautiful things and destroying them. And I'm encouraging everybody on the right wing, everybody who's seeing these videos of liberals acting in a degenerate and reprehensible way, I'm urging you to not allow the anger to bring you down to the level where they are. And I think that's really important. I can be guilty of that. And so this is also a message to myself. So I wanted to start off, as far as the assassination goes, I want to start off by maybe trying to explain a little bit about why it's important. Because there's a lot of back and forth now online between people saying things such as, well, why does everybody care so much about Charlie Kirk being killed when all of these children in the school shooting had no memorial? Nobody really paid attention to that. And I understand the sentiment behind that to some degree, but I'm going to explain in the most concise way why the assassination of Charlie Kirk is different than a school shooting. So, if you're a liberal or if you're a left-wing thinker, you might not want to believe this or you might not know it, but there are millions of people in the country who consider themselves very similar to Charlie Kirk, not just in terms of their appearance, being, white Christians, but also in terms of their political positions, in terms of how they see the world and what they believe about it. So if you're one of these many millions of middle class Christians in America, and you wake up one day to find out that Charlie Kirk, who was a young 31-year-old father of two children with a wife, very active political organizer, obviously created a successful, I guess you would call it almost like a youth outreach and, you know, basically a whole program that was developed to create a pipeline for young college kids to be brought into the political system. Now, you might not agree with Charlie's position, but you have to admit that he did a very good job at what he did. And there's reasons why I think he was so successful, and to be upfront, the major reason was that the majority of the organization was funded and financed and basically operated by wealthy Zionist Jewish billionaires and other millionaire donors. And so there's a reason, not that Charlie didn't actually work and gain the success and earn it. He was incredibly talented at what he did, but he was able to influence the minds of millions and millions of fresh college young adults. And so from the perspective of the country at large, when somebody who has influenced the minds of millions of college students around the country gets murdered, this carries with it an element that makes it different from a school shooting. Now, it doesn't mean that the lives of the children that were lost in the school shooting are any less valuable or that their deaths are any less meaningful. None of that is the case. It's just simply the case that the country at large was, for the most part, acquainted with Charlie. He represented something to people where they saw themselves in his activism and in his positions. It's really that simple. And so there are reasons why people like Charlie end up getting a lot of attention. Now, you might disagree with his positions, as we said, but the reality is that his influence over college young adults is incredibly significant, because obviously every political class or movement or party is required in some sense to continually field new candidates, new organizers, new voters. And so Charlie Kirk represented a nexus, a point where the donor class and the financiers of the political system could, in some sense, gain access to fresh college minds that would, if groomed and trained properly, go on to be influential political movers and shakers for the donors and the people that mentored them. And so Charlie represented a very, not just financially, but politically valuable system of influence, right? And now there are, I guess let's say this. Sorry, I'm looking back and forth at my notes because I want to make sure I do this in a proper order. So we know why the assassination was important, and in line with that idea, why his death was so important, we can also come to understand something of a motive for the people that would desire to kill Charlie Kirk. And what does that motive have to do? Well, he's influential. And so if you agree with his policies, this would lead you to want to continually support him. If you disagree with his policies, then it would behoove you to put an end to his movement in some sense, right? And so we can start to get an idea of, we can start to see the contours of the two theories concerning the assassination. And we're going to talk about those two theories now. And in some sense, I'm only saying two theories because they've been presented in the discourse as though they are mutually exclusive. Okay. And on the one hand, you have this idea that Charlie was assassinated by a transgender loving ex-Mormon raised by Republican parents, very conservative, raised up around guns, was obviously talented, 4.0 GPA, was involved in STEM and computers since he was very young. It seems as though the FBI is pretty convinced that this guy, Tyler Robinson, was the assassin. There's kind of sub theories in the suggested theory that Tyler Robinson is the assassin. And what's being portrayed as the opposite end of the spectrum in terms of the two theories is that Israel, or I guess you could say some type of intelligence or organized crime element, was involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. So on the one hand, you have leftist, radical, Antifa adjacent, sociopathic, transgender loving, I guess somebody who was just genuinely set off by what he saw as the fascist positions of Charlie Kirk. And then on the other hand, you have the narrative coming together that Charlie was actually in the process of a change of heart in terms of his commitment to Zionism and to the state of Israel. And so in this camp, obviously the motive for the assassination becomes Charlie is having this change of heart. He's influencing the minds of millions of people from the perspective of the Jewish lobby and the state of Israel. You are looking at statistics that say pretty much every single human being between the ages of 18 and 30 is not in support of Israel. And not only that, but you have on the docket coming up in the future a genocide and an ethnic cleansing, as well as in a project of empire building. You've recently bombed 6 countries. All of this process that Israel is involved in requires and it necessitates the financing that comes from America. Not just the money directly, but specifically the influence and also the weapons. And so it seems to me that there's good reason to believe both of these could be true. And that's what we're going to talk about. So I think if we look specifically at the assassination, it seems pretty clear that it's not that it's pretty clear, but it seems pretty reasonable to conclude that the event, the process was something that would have involved more than one person. And we have Discord messages, apparently, according to the FBI, that would tell us that that's true, that there was some planning involved on the internet, that Tyler Robinson was in contact with his lover, who is suggested to be transgender. They live together. And so it seems pretty clear that the operation itself was not just a guy who woke up one morning or maybe a month ago and started to plan on his own and secretly didn't tell anyone. But we have even more information that has to do with basically the involvement of Tyler Robinson and the information surrounding his background. So let's see. Let me get my other page of notes here. So as far as Tyler Robinson goes, I'm not going to give you a whole rundown because you could find other people who are doing that, but I want to just give you a few of the reasons why I find the mainstream narrative that we're getting from the FBI, basically the story that they're going with. I'm going to explain to you why I find that hard to believe. So we know for a fact that there was out-of-state individuals and vehicles that were meeting with both Tyler Robinson and his roommate in the weeks leading up to the shooting. We know that the boyfriend, basically based on his digital footprint, we know from his family members that he was hyper anti-conservative, was a little bit violent and radical. The network of connections, as far as the Discord and the internet footprint goes, basically reveals to us that there are people in that circle of friends that were aware of something happening before it happened. So they actually made posts online and exchanged information with each other saying, you know, such and such is going to happen. Can't wait for this. And I'm going to show you the tweets and stuff because we saved all that information. And so basically the working theory as far as the FBI is concerned is that Tyler Robinson was basically a easy to manipulate kind of radical action taking guy. Um, and I guess in some sense what they're suggesting is that the trans boyfriend was manipulating him and his desire and his love for him. So that's, I mean, and generally speaking, that's kind of the gist of the story that we're getting from the FBI. And the FBI has said that they haven't ruled out co-conspirators, but they, you know, they are focused on the fact that it appears that Tyler Robinson was radicalized on the internet. So we're going to be following this closely and we'll continue looking at it. But this gives you an idea of what's happening kind of as far as the FBI is concerned. And now we're going to go through here. I'm going to mute this real quick. I need to get my jacket off because it's getting hot in here. All right. Sorry about that, guys. It's hot in here with the light going. All right. So we have an idea of what the FBI is saying. In my opinion, it seems pretty legitimate. They haven't really said much else. Of course, there's been some other comments that are questionable, but I think overall, it's not hard to believe, right? It's not hard to believe that this guy was radicalized in some sense, maybe online by a community where people were able to isolate him and influence him in very specific ways. If it is true that he was really in love with this transgender boyfriend, then there's no doubt that love can do crazy things to people, especially people who don't get a lot of attention or people who are very desperate for attention. You know, I'm not saying it's guaranteed to be true, but I'm saying it's not hard to believe, okay? And it's also not hard to believe when you look at the prevailing sentiments in these communities that Tyler Robinson was a part of. So these transgender communities are militant. They're open about their training with firearms. They do really believe that Trump is a fascist, a Christian fascist dictator that is a white supremacist. And, you know, he secretly wants to install like a Christian nationalist government. And somebody like Charlie Kirk, as far as they're concerned, is somebody who's better off dead. So, judging by their own language and rhetoric, judging by their behavior in the world, and judging by what we know about how they communicate with each other, we don't really have any reason to believe that it's not the case that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by what I would suggest is a group of radical leftists, possibly transgender community. And we have we have some of the foreknowledge. So I will show you. Let's see. Let me bring the screen down here. Whoop. All right, we're gonna make that small. Now, if you look, we have speculation grows that Charlie Kirk's assassin was tied to a leftist network after his transgender boyfriend followed someone posting, "We did it," minutes after Kirk's death, and multiple out-of-state cars were seen visiting the killer's home weeks before the hit. And I'm going to show you some of the people. You can see this tweet here from a person named Altulij, said September 10th will be a very interesting day. That was all the way back August 6th. Okay. This guy named Omar said Charlie Kirk is coming to my college tomorrow. I really hope someone evaporates him literally. Let's just say something big will happen tomorrow. That was the day before. This person tweeted 5 days before, you guys, I have something big coming soon. Just be sure to check the news. You'll know it when you see it. And then after it happened, that afternoon on the 10th, he said, quote tweeted himself and said, well, that's that. So there's a bunch more that you can get into. I don't want to get dragged down into all the details, but what I'm trying to communicate just in a concise way is that we know for sure the guy, Tyler Robinson, allegedly the shooter in the assassination, was clearly connected through his transgender boyfriend, lover, to a network of other transgender activists that were radical and militant and connected to groups of transgenders in Utah that were training with firearms. And they all apparently had prior knowledge of the assassination. One of them all the way back in August. So I think it's clear that we can say for sure that there's some type of prior knowledge. There's probably a group of people who knew about it before. And not only that, but probably were involved in the planning. And I think that's pretty conclusive. There's no doubt about that. Now, this doesn't really tell us much more than it's likely that Charlie Kirk was assassinated by this, I guess what you would call a leftist terror cell, transgender terror cell, I guess. And I don't think that this rules out, however, the idea that foreign intelligence or that Israel might have been involved. And so I think as far as that goes, we're okay. And now what I want to show you now is we're going to look at an article by a fella named Suleiman. He hosts some really large spaces on X. It's probably some of the largest organic spaces on X at all. And he is I have to be upfront with you. He's definitely an Israel critic. But he's a good journalist, and he is pretty upfront with what he says. And so we're going to do a little breeze over. Keep in your mind what we've just talked about. We have Tyler Robinson's been arrested. He is provably connected to a group of transgender radicals that are open about their training with firearms. They have out-of-state license plates visiting the house in the weeks prior to the shooting. And the people online that he's connected to shared very public statements of prior knowledge. That's all on this side of the table. And now we're going to look at the Israel side of the table. So I'm going to try not to read this whole thing because it's a pretty long article, but I'm going to give you a couple excerpts. For 3 days straight, I hosted the largest organic spaces on X where thousands of listeners gathered in real time to dissect the shocking assassination of Charlie Kirk. The volume of speculation was enormous, the theories often sensational, and the pressure to declare blame immediate. Yet I resisted. That was my position then, one of caution and restraint. I refused to amplify claims that lack strong evidence. I reminded listeners that in moments of chaos, disinformation thrives, and it is precisely in those moments that journalists and commentators must practice discipline. But my position remained. It was critical to avoid falling into the reflex of blaming Israel for every geopolitical crisis without evidence. Only later, after multiple sources close to Kirk approached me with testimony and a coherent narrative about his private doubts over a U.S. war with Iran and his growing independence from pro-Israel donors, did I begin to reassess. The evidence those sources provided and the context it gave changed the trajectory of my positions. And so we're going to look at a few of the quotes. So we're going to get a little bit background on Turning Point USA, and we're going to build out a little bit of the case. And what I'm doing here is trying to steelman the argument. If Israel's involved, we're going to make the best case that we possibly can that that's true. Kirk's organization, Turning Point USA, was, by his own and the group's accounts, a remarkable machine. Large campus reach, a cadre of trained organizers, and a network that helped place young conservatives into the political orbit. The sources I spoke with stressed that this scale is precisely why a shift at the top could terrify major funders who invested for years to build that pipeline. There's no doubt that Charlie Kirk was among the most influential figures on the American right. More than a mere activist, he was both strategist and firebrand, shaping a generation's political vocabulary. And he was also Israel's staunchest, most competent advocate within the conservative movement. To lose him, as one insider put it, meant losing the whole of the right wing. And I want to say for a second, there's no way that that's an exaggeration, is what I meant to say. Charlie Kirk really represented a nexus of power that's very difficult to articulate the significance of, because what Israel's involved in right now in the Middle East is something that has required 5 decades of very serious planning, financial maneuvering, political maneuvering, power brokering. All of these things have kind of led up to this moment where Israel now has a chance to solidify not only its influence in America, but also to expand its intentions and its field of influence in the Middle East. And so, Israel's bombed 5 countries in the past couple of years. Like, this is obviously something they want to continue doing in the future, expanding their land and territory. And Charlie Kirk was basically giving them an infinite pipeline of young American conservatives that were indoctrinated to be Zionists. The Jewish donors were using Turning Point USA as a way to integrate Zionism and support for Israel into the ideology of America First and just traditional conservatism in the young right wing. And there wasn't very much competition for that spot. I mean, Charlie Kirk really put this company together. He did this organizing and he really cornered the campuses. I mean, that's pretty impressive what happened. And now obviously there's reasons why that worked so well, but it's important to understand, excuse me, the significance of his role. So we're going to look at a little bit of the scale. So by mid-2025, the scale of Kirk's empire was staggering. TPUSA boasted a presence on more than 3,500 campuses nationwide. Reports suggested nearly 9,000 chapters tied to colleges and universities, and another 1,100 at the high school level. The organization claimed more than 250,000 student members and activists actively engaged in recruitment, campaigning, and training. With over 350 full and part-time staff members employed through its national field program, TPUSA built a professional machine capable of amplifying Kirk's message at every level of youth politics. And so you have to remember that the level, especially the level of college, especially in the Ivy League schools and the schools that are producing future power brokers and influential people, the value, if you're a political influencer, somebody like an operator for Israel, and your goal is to make sure that the continuous funding from the United States to Israel doesn't stop because you're in the middle of carrying out this ethnic cleansing and a genocide and expanding the empire. So if somebody is able to basically put into your lap the opportunity to have your message put into the minds of millions of college-age kids in America, this is a no-brainer. And up until the last maybe 4 or 5 years, it was working pretty swimmingly, going all the way back to 2012. And so this foundation is why whispers of a potential shift by Charlie Kirk rattled so many in positions of power. If Kirk began to waver, if he questioned the centrality of Israel to conservative identity, the impact would be catastrophic for his benefactors. His influence was not confined to speeches or broadcasts. It was baked into a sprawling infrastructure of chapters, organizers, donors, and events. To lose Kirk's uncompromising advocacy was to risk losing the very pipeline of the right. It was put to me, a change of course by Charlie Kirk wouldn't just be problematic, it would be existential. It would mean the collapse of pro-Israel support across the conservative movement, not just at the margins, but on every major issue. And now it's important to recognize as well that, do you remember when the situation in Gaza first started? It was Harvard, it was Berkeley, it was UCLA, it was all these college campuses who really kicked off the protest movement, the pro-Palestine resistance on the college campuses in America. It was the young college-age young adults that were on the ground, that were getting out and doing protesting when Israel started to invade Gaza, or at least did it publicly. And so, right after that time, Bill Ackman and other Jewish billionaires basically, well, let's say they perpetrated a pressure campaign on the presidents and the boards and donors of different Ivy League universities, including Harvard. And actually, they were able to get the people removed. The president of Harvard, I think it was Claudine Gay at the time, was fired or caused to resign based on a political pressure campaign that was organized by Bill Ackman. And so we know for a fact that these Jewish donors and organizations that lobby on behalf of Israeli politics, they target universities. They target Ivy League schools and they target the STEM graduates specifically. And so this is a huge platform that they could potentially lose, is my point. I don't want to belabor the project. So this part is, let's get to, this is a good part. So we're fast forwarding now to about the time when the conflict with Iran is going on. Charlie began to recognize a growing divergence. For years, he believed that Zionist interests and Israel's positions were fully aligned with his own views on U.S. foreign relations. But according to my source, he never saw himself as a paid mouthpiece for a foreign nation. Rather, he understood it as a shared alignment of causes. That alignment, however, began to fracture, especially on matters such as foreign influence over U.S. policy, the push toward war with Iran, and his decision to platform friends and allies who voiced dissent. When Charlie strayed from the expected script, donors expressed their displeasure, often sending messages pressuring him to get back in line. This created a serious problem for him. In private conversations, he confided that he would continue urging Trump to avoid war with Iran, even though he knew those closest to the president did not share his position. At one point, he even acknowledged the limits of his own speech publicly. In an interview with Megyn Kelly, Charlie remarked, quote, "I have less ability to criticize the Israeli government than actual Israelis do, and that's really, really weird." What happened to Charlie sent shockwaves through the broader conservative movement. Staunch pro-Israel advocates such as Mike Cernovich began posting ominous messages on X, signaling unease. Quote, "I've activated a dead man switch. If I'm killed, names of people responsible will be released. I suggest every prominent conservative conduct a similar review of their lives and ensure justice prevails." The real question is, who are the people capable of killing Cernovich? Whose names will be revealed? What group are they affiliated with, and what is their ideological belief? What leverage do they have? It appears that Charlie Kirk's assassination has caused many others to fear for their lives. That divergence is at the core of the motive alleged by those who implicated pro-war interests. If Kirk, the most effective youth organizer of his generation, publicly turned against a large-scale conflict, his influence could substantially reduce elite appetite for intervention. The sources I spoke with said this was intolerable to a slice of Kirk's donor base that favored a much harder line. It is that dynamic, the combination of influence, money, and policy disagreement, that, according to these same sources, created the context in which Kirk's enemies began to contemplate decisive action. And so you can see the picture that we're painting here. The Iran war comes around. Charlie Kirk is obviously he's involved in the close circles of Trump and the administration. He's voicing his dissatisfaction with the administration's choice to go through with what was basically a ploy for Israel to achieve certain military goals at the cost of American military and finance. And so let's look at, let's see, I wanted to get to, let's see. Let's talk to the part about Netanyahu. So, post-assassination. The killing also produced immediate reactions overseas. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu tweeted within minutes, this is fact-checked, literally within minutes, of news reports breaking that he was praying for Charlie Kirk, and later said he had spoken with Kirk 2 weeks earlier and, quote, invited him to Israel. In remarks that carried enormous symbolic weight across partisan lines, Netanyahu displayed a letter he said Kirk had sent on May 2nd, highlighting Kirk's public record of advocacy for Israel. Netanyahu's swift public expression of grief and the holding up of a letter, a physical token of alignment, added heat to a conversation already marching toward conspiracy and suspicion. My sources say Kirk had in fact refused an invitation to travel to Israel. And so if we could just do a little crash course of the timeline, basically what's happening here is Charlie Kirk begins to question whether or not the pro-Israel or the Zionist position as far as war goes is beneficial to America. And he starts to think in his mind, all of this pro-Zionist stuff, all of this pro-Israel work that I've been doing in terms of politics, I've been doing because I saw the interests of America aligned with the interests of Israel. And now it seems that Israel is pushing America to do things that are good for Israel, but not good for America. And Charlie Kirk being, you know, an American man, somebody who I think cares about his nation before foreigners. I think he believes in that. And I think he started to recognize, especially with the pressure that he was getting from the internet, because you have to remember, as all this is happening, in the many years since Charlie Kirk has been on the road, basically being a surrogate for Trump, he's been continuously maligned for his pro-Israel position. He's had people on X, people calling his show and his live call-in segments, people showing up and asking him questions at his events on campuses. I mean, he's been aware of the criticism on the right as far as his position on Israel. And so what I'm trying to explain is that it's not hard for me to believe that somebody like Charlie Kirk was starting to have a change of heart as far as Zionism goes and as far as his relationship to the Jewish donors that really made Turning Point possible. And I think when you start to think about it this way, now granted it is a conspiracy, but you have to remember, I mean, this is what we're working with. This is the information that we have. And so we get down to, I want to read the last few paragraphs here. All right. This is going to be a little bit of a stretch, but I want to, but it is important. Let's see. Let me find, oh, I should have marked this earlier. I'm sorry, guys. All right. Why does this matter beyond the tragedy of one life taken? Because Kirk was not merely a media personality, he helped build an institutional architecture that reaches thousands of campuses and millions of young people. The sources I spoke with reminded me that a realignment at the top of that structure, whether through choice or force, could remake the right's approach to geopolitics and to its grounding donor class. One source framed the choice as stark. Let Kirk drift away from the hardline positions that donors favored and risk a durable weakening of organized pro-Israel influence among the next generation, or act to prevent that drift and seize institutional control. That binary, as recounted to me, explains why some figures felt the stakes justified extreme measures. The explanation provided by my sources paints a significant and sobering picture. Put yourself in the position of Israel, or Zionist billionaires, or whoever else may have been impacted by the situation. There are two possible paths forward. The first option is to allow events to unfold naturally. That would mean Charlie Kirk continuing his evolution, no longer a blindly loyal proponent of Israel, especially when such loyalty might harm the interests of the United States. In this scenario, he would drift further from the pro-Israel orthodoxy. And then you'd have two highly influential figures, Charlie Kirk and Nick Fuentes, who to varying degrees hold the attention and loyalty of large segments of millennials and Gen Z, and who are openly critical of some Israeli actions. From the perspective of those invested in maintaining unwavering support for Israel, that scenario would be existentially dangerous. The second option is to neutralize Kirk now, remove him from the equation, reclaim full control over Turning Point USA and its narrative, assert dominance over the organization's future direction, ensure that whoever replaces Kirk has no choice but to fall in line and follow instructions. With the right messaging, they could not only retain the right-wing base, but grow it further, mobilizing it to wage political war against what is labeled as the left. The result? Civil unrest in the US, a more deeply divided nation, and the empowerment of forces seeking a totalitarian state under the guise of order and patriotism. In the days following the assassination and following a powerful speech by Kirk's widow, Erica Kirk, on September 12th, TPUSA reportedly received requests to establish approximately 18,000 new chapters. This effectively doubled its potential grassroots footprint almost overnight, signaling a massive and unexpected resurgence of momentum. What we are witnessing is the rebirth of a movement that had been dwindling under a leader who was beginning to question Israel's influence and, more significantly, who had taken a firm anti-war stance on Iran. That anti-war position directly challenged a long-standing geopolitical agenda, one that dates back decades and is outlined in documents like the Clean Break Memo. The movement toward a Greater Israel project is not new, but Kirk's break from the script threatened to disrupt its momentum at a critical time. There are two cardinal facts readers should hold in mind. One is that Charlie Kirk was killed on September 10th, 2025. The shooting has produced national shock and a full criminal investigation. And two, multiple people who say they were close to Kirk have approached journalists and provided testimony suggesting he had drifted from a once solid pro-Israel posture and had privately opposed a large-scale war with Iran. These are allegations that help explain motive in the eyes of those sources. And so I'm going to show you one little video, and then it's just a little video of Charlie Kirk in his own words. And I want to be clear too. I'm not a huge fan of Charlie Kirk's politics. I don't really find myself agreeing with him all that much. I am, traditional. I'm not really conservative like he is. I'm probably a little more liberal, but I want people to understand the gravity of the situation and to recognize that, well, we'll get into it after here. Listen to Charlie in his own words.
I gotta be careful the way I say this. They're gonna try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click, our guts are usually right. I gotta be careful.
So there's quite a few other clips like that as well. If you want to do a little digging, you can find there's 4 or 5 clips now going around where it's pretty clear. If you look at the evolution of Charlie's thought, if you go back 6 to 12 months and you start looking at the clips, the appearance that he did on PBD that you just saw, he went on Megyn Kelly and said things that were very similar. And then in private conversations with people close to him, he also was articulating the idea that his sentiments towards Israel were changing. So we have kind of the basis of the story now. You have the radical leftist transgender boyfriend situation with this network of what can only be called transgender terror cells that are basically organized online, but in real life as well. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, which is that Charlie began to reveal himself possibly as a liability to a multi-billion-dollar lobbying machine, as well as a multi-generational plan to expand the empire of Israel and to ethnically cleanse Gaza. And what I want to recommend to you is that it's still too early for us to know for sure. Of course, the odds of us getting the information necessary to draw a proper conclusion from the FBI is totally unrealistic. My intuition is that we're going to hear very little about this, similar to what happened to the shooter in Butler, that fella named Thomas Crooks. And I want to say a couple things that I think we should be considering when it comes to events like this. The idea that Tyler Robinson and Thomas Crooks, the idea that these 2 young men who were somewhat of a loner, they were definitely terminally online people. They did not go out much. They didn't have a huge social network. The idea that these people left no digital footprint should be offensive to any rational thinking human being. And my point is that when it's convenient for what's convenient for the establishment is that, oh, I think I got a message. Beck, I don't know if I can see that on this thing. Yeah, I agree, Bex. Yeah, I agree for sure. Yeah, I definitely think the feds wrote those text messages for sure. I didn't want to get too caught up in all those details because I wanted to get to this point basically is that when we're thinking about events like this, we have to remember that if we're ever offered a dialectic, especially when it happens very quickly, if the response on behalf of the media and the mainstream of discourse is to say it is either this one or it's this one. Anytime we're presented that type of option, I'm always going to lean in the direction that it's a little bit of both. And if I had to make a prediction, I would suggest that this event was probably something where Charlie's death was, it was basically actualized by Israel, but using a radical leftist terror network. And the reason I suggest that is because if you look at the history of political assassinations, it's very rare that they happen just from some random dude gets mad enough to shoot someone, because people are normally not that good at being criminals. And the people in the world who are most capable of carrying out assassinations are the intelligence agencies. They have the means, they have the finances, they have the ability to hide people. And if something like this happens, it's reasonable, I think, for us to begin thinking from that perspective. Now, we have to change if we don't get the information that fits that idea. But I'm going to show, I got this little blurb from the Grok AI about Israel's involvement in political assassination. So let me read this to you. Investigative journalist Ronen Bergman, in his book Rise and Kill First, based on interviews with over 1,000 sources in Israeli intelligence, estimates over 2,700 targeted killings by Israeli agencies since 1948, more than any other Western nation. This includes Mossad's share, but encompasses all services and both pre- and post-state paramilitary actions. Up to 2000, the start of the Second Intifada, Israel conducted more than 500 assassination operations, resulting in over 1,000 deaths, per Mossad sources cited by Al Jazeera. From 2000 to 2008 alone, Israeli forces, often with intelligence input, carried out at least 387 targeted killings of Palestinians, per human rights group B'Tselem, with 234 targets killed and 153 collateral deaths. So anyways, I'm not going to keep going through all the statistics, but the point is just to show you that historically speaking, assassinations are often carried out by Mossad and often have intelligence involvement. And so I want to take a moment to think from the perspective of Israel and to give you a little bit of a justification for why I believe it's not necessary for us to choose whether Charlie Kirk's assassination was carried out by a radical leftist terrorist network or if it was carried out by Israel. And the reason being is that if you are an intelligence agency and you desire to carry out an assassination, the best way that you could possibly do that is to take advantage of a pre-existing online network of unstable, radical, militant people who are angry at the person that you would like to have assassinated, and you would anonymously influence them through the Discord servers and the Telegram channels, and you would groom them, and you would get them angry, you would help them, guide them along the way, and then you would simply slowly manipulate them to carry it out. And now, the reason why this is useful is because, for one, you don't have to have anybody in Mossad or whatever intelligence agency directly involved. You can actually just do it via the Discord server and the Telegram servers. And the reason why I think this is a pretty reasonable conclusion is that over the past 5 years, we've been discovering thousands of these Discord networks and Telegram networks where people find each other based on mutual interest in school shootings, in gore videos, in terrorism, and violence of all shapes and forms. And the majority of them are not specifically left-wing. They're not specifically right-wing. They are genuine philosophical nihilists. They believe in accelerating the collapse of Western civilization by any means necessary. And that means that they're willing to manipulate the public's commitment to their own political beliefs. And so when they carry out a school shooting, for instance, they will have messaging associated with the event that is both extreme right-wing and extreme left-wing. And these people, they don't care about politics. They only care about violence. And they're nihilists. So they believe ultimately in death. They believe that the destruction of Western civilization is necessary for them to usher in their dystopian nightmare of a future. I'm not sure what they imagine that would be, but these groups exist. We've known they existed for a long time. And we also know that the FBI has been catching them using these Discord networks to extort people, to blackmail them, and to basically extort them into carrying out terrorist acts or violent acts on camera, cutting themselves, cutting other people. I apologize talking about this. I know it's disturbing, but these networks of people exist and they're already out there. And so what I'm suggesting is that it's not very difficult for an intelligence agency to take advantage of these pre-existing networks by influencing them in a clandestine way. Okay. So I think this is a high possibility. It's very possible that Israel wanted Charlie Kirk assassinated. If we take it to be true, what we're learning about the fact that he was brought to this struggle session with Bill Ackman and other pro-Israel influencers from Twitter. They brought them out to the Hamptons, Charlie Kirk and all these other influencers, and basically interrogated Charlie on his beliefs about Israel. And we're learning more about this story as time goes on. And the more I learn about it, the more it seems pretty clear that we have to entertain the possibility that Israel was involved. I don't doubt that Tyler Robinson was involved. I don't doubt that the network of transgender terrorists on Discord were involved. It's very clear that they had prior knowledge. They shared it publicly. So at this point, we have to wait and see what more information comes about. But I wanted to say one more thing about leftism and kind of basically the spiral into more and more violence, which seems to be unavoidable at this point. And I hear a lot that, people will say, if you're critiquing the left wing specifically, oh, you just don't get it. You're just falling for the trap because the powers that be just want us all fighting with each other, and they just want the left and the right at each other's throats, and then we don't pay attention to the billionaires and the ruling class and this, that, and the other thing. And that is true to some degree. I don't want to say that isn't the case. It's very clear that a divided population is much easier to manipulate. I think we all can understand that intuitively. But, and this is a capital B-U-T, but it's very important to recognize that even though this divide between the left and the right is often exploited or instrumentalized by the managerial class, it's not the case that there is no difference, and I'm saying that as somebody who is politically left wing. I do fall just barely to the left. And what I want to encourage other people in the left wing to do and to be aware of is to not give in to the temptation to be bullied by these extremists and these radical people who want to turn what could have been an amazing thing, which is the liberal ideology that made Western civilization possible. They want to turn that into a fucking nightmare and a horror show. And the problem is that right now, nobody on the right wing is going to be able to successfully communicate to radical left-wing thinkers. It's really up to the people of the Democratic Party and the people on the left wing of the political spectrum to police their own, is what I'm saying. We should not be tolerating people in our lives saying that it's okay to murder people. That should never be acceptable. You're not tough. You're not cool. It's not edgy. It's dumb and it's stupid. And it's one of those things that what frustrates me about it, I think, is that when I talk about these things, I shared as the assassination was happening, I was collecting in real time the responses of real liberal left-wing people. And everybody is reaching out to me on Facebook like, oh, Ryan, are you okay? Like, it seems like you're really buying into the scam because you're only attacking the leftists. It's like, listen, man, I've never in my life seen an outpouring more reprehensible than what I witnessed the night that Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And I'm going to show you some of them because I'm annoyed that people tried to pretend like this wasn't happening or tried to gaslight me into thinking that it was just, you know, just a few bad apples. It's just some people. It's not all people. And I know it's not all people. And we can speak in generalities without having to be told every 3 seconds that there's an exception to the rule. We know there's an exception to the rule. But please, I'm not calling on you to be hateful or angry, but I just want you to understand, even if you're not a right-wing person, these people that I'm about to show you, they don't care if you're left-wing or right-wing. If you do not believe exactly what they believe, you are nothing to them. They will kill you just like they killed Charlie Kirk, and they will laugh. They will share memes about it online, and they will tell your family members that they deserve to die too. Okay? And this is happening on the left. I don't know why. I don't, you know, I've seen some very radical right-wing people in my life, some very racist, very Nazi-like people, and they don't look like Charlie Kirk. But all of this evil that's happening on the left wing, it needs to be exposed to sunlight, and people need to talk about it. And if you see this happening in your life, you need to say something, because a lot of people could die if this gets out of control. And I'm not trying to be that guy. I'm not trying to be the doomer, but this is the reality of the situation. So I want to close out with these clips here. We're going to struggle through this together, but I just want people to be realistic about where we stand.
I don't want your salvations.
Why?
I want you to fucking die. We're not gonna give you a second chance, even when you beg for it on your knees, begging and pleading.
I have breaking news. We think that Charlie Kirk just got shot in the neck. Hey, ooh, ah, ooh. Cut the music. Cut the music. In real talk, I'm not truly celebrating that he got shot in the neck. I think it's really sad for his family because I know he was a father, and if he does pass away from this, hopefully not, hopefully so.
Can you imagine the level of depravity to go on the internet and record a first-person selfie video of you saying that you're happy that a father was taken away from 2 children and a wife? I don't care where you come from or what you believe in or what you imagine Charlie Kirk believed. That is a coldness in the heart that needs to be studied by psychologists. The casual depravity is beyond disturbing. And I don't know if I'm just more sensitive to this because I'm into philosophy and I know what underpins a statement like this, but this is like incredibly disturbing. This is not an extremist, radical, or transgender. This is like a regular girl. She's probably works as a nurse or a teacher somewhere.
Do you think political violence is getting worse?
It's always been bad. School shootings right now, about 250 last time I checked, and that was about right before Tucker Carlson was killed.
Charlie Kirk?
Oh, fuck. I said Tucker Carlson. I think we're such divided as a country, and it's also one of those things where Trump has used division and violence to strengthen his movement because he knows he has power if he separates people.
So you blame Trump and his allies getting shot at on him?
I blame the alt-right movement, and I blame white supremacy. The right, what they're doing.
So let me say something really quick. If you have anybody in your life who believes that something like white supremacy is like living in the government and trying to assert itself in some way, or that Donald Trump is like secretly a fascist, or now don't get me wrong, I despise Donald Trump. I think the administration is horrific, but I've read enough history books to know what fascism is and what it means. And I can tell you there aren't really fascist people in America. There might be some, living in a cave or a hole somewhere. They have no political significance or power. But this idea that Donald Trump represents anything different than what's been happening the past 2 decades in America is beyond delusional. And it's like, to me, if this woman can be convinced that white supremacy and Donald Trump is responsible for the fact that Charlie Kirk got assassinated, it's like, I understand her point. I get that the rhetoric has been increasing, but the left and the right can't continue doing this thing where it's like, it's always a whataboutism. Like, you don't get to just, every time you do something wrong, you can't just say, well, what about when they did it? Like, we can't keep doing this. It doesn't work that way. But listen to what she says.
Is absolutely despicable, and it's fascism. Trump is a fascist, and fascism promotes violence.
Don't you think that's victim blaming?
Nope. And
Oh, is it not?
I don't blame white men for.
You just blame conservative white men. Is that not victim blaming?
Fall into the category of fascism.
So you blame the victims.
I'm educated. I read books.
You want
So notice the leap in logic there. White conservative men categorized as fascism.
Oh, I'm educated.
victims. So you the victims.
I'm educated. I read.
I want you to hear this again.
Is that not victim blaming?
Fall into the category of fascism.
So you blame the victims.
I'm educated. I read books.
What do you want to say?
Do I feel bad that Charlie Kirk died in that?
What's so ironic about that girl saying that she reads books is it's very clear that she's not really read a lot of books at all. Because anybody who studies history, and trust me, I can source this, anybody that studies history is not going to come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is a fascist. Just period. Unless they have a legitimate bias that they're trying to confirm.
Way? No, it's extremely.
You don't feel bad about him bleeding out in front of his wife and kids?
It's extremely ironic.
Yes, because
I'm not
he
gonna
promoted
lie.
gun violence. He said the Second Amendment was worth protecting, even if people dying, it was worth it to protect the Second Amendment. And his last words were violence. When he was shot, he was talking about gun violence.
It's extremely ironic that he died in that way.
They're rage baiting him to him.
I'm not gonna feel sympathy for someone that doesn't think I deserve to exist.
Someone who got murdered.
Here's another thing that I always see that I find really irritating. Gay people, transgender people, whatever type of minority oppressed class that we're talking about. This idea that, you know, because somebody is opposed to gay marriage, that just means that we just don't want gay people to exist, or that because we think somebody can't become a woman from a man, that just means that we want transgender people to be eliminated. And a lot of this is rooted in the appeal on the left, especially in the modern version of it, is very much attached to this idea that your identity is self-expressive. It's really attached to this idea that you are not given anything of an identity. You inherit very few traits that you can't change, and that anybody who tells you that what you imagine as your identity is not acceptable, that is immediately seen as a threat to your being as a whole, because the identity has become the whole motivation of who you are. So it's one of those things, I notice it all the time, and it's really frustrating. And if you notice it, just be aware of it. And you have to realize sometimes I feel like I don't understand these people, and it's because the leaps of logic in their thinking doesn't make sense to me, but it's something that you have to be aware of.
In front of his family, no sympathy.
Well, he said that women belong in the kitchen.
So if you would joke about women being in the kitchen, you should get shot in the throat.
He argued that women should be in the kitchen. He argued that women should be mothers.
Okay, if you argue about women being in the kitchen, you should be murdered right now.
Listen, I'm educated.
He argued that women should be mothers. The audacity. Can you imagine arguing that women should be mothers? How appalling.
She's educated. She reads books.
I want to dedicate this next one to an absolute piece of shit of a human being. The pronouns was, were. Because if you chat shit, you will get banned. Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk, you piece of shit.
So all of my liberal friends and Democrats who are telling me, oh, it's just a couple people, just a couple bad apples, you know, it's not everybody on the left, it's just a few. This is I don't know how many thousands of people were at the show and how many, you know, hundreds of thousands of fans this guy has. But you can hear the crowd cheering. It's not, you know, it is what it is. These are some nice folks who took just a memorial that said "Rest in peace, Charlie Kirk," and they showed up and wrote about how he's a Nazi and drew dicks on it and stuff because they're, you know, super mature, nice people.
To effectively create change in the world we desire. And Side Prop will argue that at times there is simply nothing else that can be required other than violent retaliation. And this is a view I wholeheartedly agree with. The view that some institutions are too broken, too aggressive, too oppressive to be reformed, like cancers of our society. They must and they should be taken down by any means necessary.
Again, notice the irony that this man who's saying that violence is necessary in order to take down these institutions that he so clearly despises, he's giving this opinion from as the president of the Oxford Union. So I'm not sure what institution he's talking about violently destroying, but I'm pretty sure that he's expressing that opinion from inside of one of those very institutions. And what's crazy about this is that I don't want to come off as though I'm being soft or anything, but if somebody like myself was to go on television or to continually on Facebook call for the violent overthrow of the government, I would very quickly be getting a knock at my door. I was stopped at the airport coming back from Nicaragua when I was 18 because I had done 3 or 4 TV shows about 9/11 in Manchester Community Access Media. And the thing that bothers me about this is that this type of rhetoric on the left has been going on for decades. It has been increasingly more violent. It has been it's getting an increasingly wider audience, and more regular people on the left are becoming more and more radical. And I don't think that's for the better. I think that's a very bad thing.
So I keep on seeing like posts about this Charlie dude, whatever, Kirk dude, whatever, regardless. And let me just say this. I'm surprised that y'all didn't get rid of him sooner. And I'm surprised that you guys aren't getting rid of more people. Like, don't stop with him. Don't let him be the end dog. Get rid of them all. And the ones that are above him. Your mayor. Your city councilman.
So she's online telling everybody on the internet, whatever stranger and deranged person is watching her TikTok, that they should go out and murder their mayors and their city council members. Because apparently in her mind, those people are above Charlie Kirk in the hierarchy. It's just like so deranged and ridiculous that it's hard to even imagine that this person exists. It's crazy.
What is it? Georgia Power? The people that keep on raising our shit? The CEO, get rid of them. Yeah.
So she's saying she wants someone to murder the CEO of the Georgia Power Company because they keep on raising the prices of electricity. Usually if you kill a CEO, that apparently makes them turn the prices off, I guess. I'm not sure.
Like, what? It was so crazy. I watched like a 60 minute, whatever. Y'all know what I mean. 1 minute edit of like the things he said, and they're like so atrocious that like his wife deserves to go too. Y'all keep on talking about his wife and kids. They need to go too because they're carrying on that mentality and that lineage. Like, get rid of the whole.
I hope you heard that very clearly. I know you're talking about his wife and kids. They need to go too because they're carrying on that mentality.
Family, I'm so sorry. Why did
the
you
whole
guys stop
family?
with him?
Why'd you
Why
stop
did
with him?
Go get his grandma. Because who raised you? Like, your mom ought to be ashamed for breathing scum like you. Get rid of the
Isn't that nice?
family.
Isn't that nice? Now let me explain something to you, to all the people who keep on criticizing me for sharing this. This is not a paid Fed poster on the internet. She's not getting $100 to make this video from apparently some left-wing organization that wants to enrage right-wing voters. That's not what's happening. This woman, I guess, really believes this. Like, she really believes that Charlie Kirk is a racist, white supremacist fascist that wanted to murder black people and transgenders. And she's now celebrating and calling for the murder of his wife and children.
Like, y'all.
Let me explain something else to you. If you think that these kind of people are going to see you and they're going to think, oh, you're one of the good ones, don't be so naive. This is going to be everywhere now. This is spreading all over the place. There's like 8 to 10,000 videos of like this from all different kinds of people. Old, young, black, white, male, female. It's across the entire spectrum. And trust me, I spent the better part of 12 hours the day after the assassination collecting them and cataloging them. I'm not like reporting them or trying to tell on people. I just really want people to understand what's happening, because the next time there's violence, I'm going to show everybody this video again, and I'm going to say, nope, you can't be surprised now.
Too scary. Y'all too scary for revolution. Y'all too scary for progress. Like, y'all want results without putting in the work. You gonna have to take out trash to get a clean house. Like, it is what it is.
Dear white people, stop trying to get invited to the cookout. Hi, I'm a white, red, Native American person, and it's Murdered and Missing Indigenous Peoples Day, which means
she or he is a white, red Native American. Just keep that in mind. And she is going to confidently and condescendingly lecture white men about how to behave around minorities.
we gotta talk. All right, so I want to talk about performative allyship and why it's a problem. So I see this idea of getting invited to the cookout as the sort of the modern, I have black friends because it means you've arrived, right? But I need you to be very, very for real right now. There are some black people that have experienced so much racism at the hands of white people that they will never be okay with your presence. And I know that that's hard to swallow because you're like, but I'm good. No. If you're good, you will understand. It does not matter how cool and friendly and besties you are with
They will never be comfortable with your presence. That means we don't want you to exist. That's what she or he is saying.
Mika if her grandmother can't relax around you. And I know that you want to prove yourself, but you can't.
This was a nice mural that they painted of the Ukrainian girl that was stabbed for no reason by the man that they painted over her mural with. Very nice people. Very, very nice people.
Fuck Charlie Kirk! 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 No, you guys gotta get off Charlie Kirk! Fuck 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 Charlie Kirk! He was a racist! He was a racist! He was a racist! He was a racist! He was hateful! He was hateful! He was never like Martin Luther King! He was never like Martin Luther King! Nothing at all. Nothing at all. Nothing.
Yeah, a real racist, a real piece of shit, huh? And now, I'm just gonna wrap things up here. I appreciate you sticking with me this long. I know that was kind of it's kind of just a hanging out stream. It was a little all over the place, but I hope we got something out of it. But this is my let's see, make sure I didn't miss anything in the notes. We got a bunch of stuff we can talk about. I'll get to that stuff later. Let's see. Nope, I don't think we missed anything. So let me finish off with just an appeal to people in the country. If this situation doesn't get better, I just want people to understand that there's not much of an off-ramp now. It's already, the off-ramp is super narrow to try and turn this around before the spiral continues. I am not extremely confident at all that this is going to be turned around. I, in fact, am pretty confident that things are going to continue to spiral. And I just want to encourage people to remember what's important. And I'm encouraging myself to do this as well, to try to avoid being dragged into the emotion and the hatred and the anger. Because we're going to be seeing a whole lot of that in the coming future. These next elections are going to be incredibly tense. We have operations expanding in Israel. Likely the Trump administration is going to have to try and sell some type of conflict with Iran to the American public. All of these things are kind of coming down the pike. We have a very questionable economy starting next year. And, you know, part of the reason that I do this little stream, I guess, or channel, if you'd like to call it, is mostly just to help myself think through some of the things that are going on, but also because I do believe that conversation and communication and dialogue can change people's minds. I know that it's not easy to do, and I know that it doesn't happen often, but I do believe it's possible. And I showed all those videos not because I want to create targets for people to hate, but because I want it to be like a mirror. I want people to see where this stuff goes. When you think about being politically violent, when you think about being casual about the loss of life, just remember what that looks like, and remember the pain and the harm that it causes, and learn to be grateful for what we have. I know that everybody wants to tear everything down and destroy the system, and you know, it's too broken to be fixed, this, that, and the other thing. And that's not true. It's not true at all. It's going to take a lot of work, but it's not impossible. But it starts off with people seeing each other as human. And it seems to me like good portions of the country have left that idea behind. When young people can say on camera to the public that somebody with relatively moderate Republican political views is a Nazi, fascist, white supremacist, what they're saying when they say those things out loud is that people who believe this deserve to die. And we need to understand what they're saying. And we need to really integrate that, and to remember that this, whether you believe that the left versus right thing is just a paradigm that's artificially created, or if you know, even if you don't understand it at that level, we have to recognize that when we stop seeing other people as humans, when people become Nazis and fascists and white supremacists instead of Ryans and you know, Georges and Rogers, that's when we have really begun the descent into violence. And so I just hope that we can avoid that. I'm going to be praying for the country and praying for all of you out there. I hope that the people who see themselves on that path towards violence can make the decision to turn around. And if any of you are ever interested in talking about things, or if you're just curious about stuff and you want to chat, you can find me on my social medias. And God bless you guys all. And I hope you are well. And I will see